My difficult sister-in-law suddenly had a change of heart and invited my son to an adventure park with her daughter for a fun cousin's day out. I agreed, but just 2 hours later, my niece called me in tears. Mom says it's just a little prank, but he won't wake up, she sobbed. Panicked, I called the police and rushed over. What happened next left her absolutely terrified. I'm a 32-year-old woman, married to my husband Jay, 33, for 6 years. We have a 4-year-old son, Egon. Yes, we're Game of Thrones fans, so don't come after me in the comments. My relationship with Jay's family has never been great. They don't particularly like me because I come from a different cultural background. They are very religious, while I lean more toward being agnostic, and they blame me for Jay drifting away from his faith. But that couldn't be further from the truth. He made those choices long before he even met me. I have no idea why they fixate on me as the cause of their concerns. While we maintain polite interactions, we are far from close. After Egon was born, my mother-in-law and I managed to patch things up to some extent. She started visiting more often, and as we talked, we began to understand each other better, which helped smooth things over. My father-in-law, on the other hand, stays out of family drama entirely. He treats me with respect and doesn't meddle in our affairs, which I truly appreciate. They both absolutely adore Egon, and he loves spending time with them. So despite the rough start, things have improved. It's clear that this means a lot to Jay since he has always had a strong bond with his parents, even though they no longer share the same beliefs. The real issue is my sister-in-law, Joanna. She's 40 and has a 5-year-old daughter, Rachel. 2 years ago, Joanna's marriage fell apart when her husband discovered she was having an affair with his best friend. The whole situation was a disaster, and her ex fought hard for full custody of Rachel, though in the end, he only got visitation on weekends. It was a tough time for the whole family. While neither Jay nor I approved of Joanna's actions, we knew we had to support her because, at the end of the day, she's family. During that chaotic period, I stepped in to help by offering to watch Rachel while Joanna sorted out her life. It wasn't a big deal for me. Egon was around the same age, and having a cousin to play with was actually a bonus for both kids. So for about a month, Joanna would drop Rachel off at my place in the mornings, go handle her legal issues, find a place to live, look for jobs, and then pick Rachel up in the evening. Naturally, during that time, Rachel and Egon grew close. When Joanna finally took Rachel to live with her full-time, Rachel was really upset, and Joanna, being completely irrational, took it personally. She started believing that Rachel preferred me over her, which simply wasn't true. She was just a little kid who enjoyed playing with her cousin, that was all. I kept telling Joanna that Rachel wasn't rejecting her. She just missed having playtime with Egon. I even suggested arranging regular playdates to solve the problem. But Joanna, already dealing with so many emotions, let her insecurity get the best of her, even though she was the one responsible for the whole mess in the first place. Things took a turn for the worse when Joanna accused me of trying to steal her daughter. That was the final straw for Jay. He told her straight up that instead of pulling an attitude with us, she should be grateful that we were even helping her despite her messy cheating scandal. After that, she distanced herself from us, and it hurt me deeply because, in the end, it was the kids who suffered the most. What Joanna didn't know was that her ex-husband, Noel, used to secretly bring Rachel to our place on weekends so she could still see Egon. He made Rachel promise not to tell her mom, but we all knew it was only a matter of time before she let it slip. She was only 3 at the time, and little kids can't keep secrets forever. We figured it was worth the risk to let them stay close. When Joanna eventually found out, all hell broke loose. The drama was unreal, and my in-laws had to step in to knock some sense into her. They urged her to stop being so stubborn and think about what was best for her daughter. It took a lot of convincing, but she finally came around and agreed to let Rachel and Egon spend time together again. The truth is, these kids absolutely adore each other. They're like siblings, and since they're so close in age, they get along incredibly well. It's honestly heartwarming to watch. Jay and I had already decided we'd only have one child, and I always worried that growing up without a sibling might be lonely for Egon. But with Rachel around, it felt like we got the best of both worlds. They took turns visiting each other. Sometimes Rachel came over to our place, other times Egon went to Joanna's or even Noel's. More often than not, they were at my in-laws' house, and everything seemed fine. Never in a million years did I suspect that Joanna had been secretly holding a grudge against me all this time. If I had known, I would have been more careful and put Egon's safety first. Now, I can't shake the feeling that I failed as a mother. For the past 2 years, things have been relatively smooth with Joanna. The kids got along, and that was what mattered most to me. But yesterday, everything changed. Jay had been out of town for a week due to work, so it was just me and Egon at home. Even my in-laws were away on vacation. 2 days ago, I suddenly started feeling really sick, fever, nausea, the whole deal. It wasn't anything serious, but I was weak and exhausted. A friend came over to help me out, which was a lifesaver. Yesterday was supposed to be Rachel's turn to come over, but I barely had the energy to take care of one child, let alone two. So, I called Joanna and asked if we could reschedule, explaining that I wasn't feeling well. To my surprise, she kindly offered to take Egon for the day so I could get some rest. I was incredibly grateful. He'd still get his playtime with Rachel, and I'd have a chance to sleep and recover. We finalized the plan, and Joanna said she'd pick up Egon, take both kids to the adventure park, and then have them sleep over at her place. It seemed perfect. They'd have a blast, tire themselves out, and I'd get a full day to recover. Looking back, I never once suspected anything was off. I truly thought Joanna was just being thoughtful and helping me out because I was sick. If only I had known what was really going on. Yesterday, around noon, Joanna came by to pick up Egon. Before they left, I reminded her to send me updates from time to time, and she assured me there was nothing to worry about. He'd be fine. The moment they walked out the door, I collapsed onto my bed. I was still running a fever and completely drained. Plus, I had no reason to stress. Egon was with his aunt. What could possibly go wrong? I don't even remember when I drifted off, but at 2:05 p.m., I was jolted awake by the sound of my phone ringing. When I checked, I saw a missed call and a text from Joanna. I had been so deep in sleep that I hadn't even heard the first call. As soon as I picked up, I heard crying on the other end of the line. My entire body went cold. Egon had severe hives all over his body. His face and eyes were swollen. Panic surged through me as I rushed him to the emergency room, furious the entire way. I wanted nothing more than to tear into Joanna right then and there, but getting Egon medical attention was my top priority. She could be dealt with later. At the hospital, the doctors asked if he had any known allergies. I told them about his severe nut allergy and reassured them that everyone in the family was always extremely careful about it. They asked if he might have accidentally eaten something containing nuts. That's when I turned to Joanna. She shook her head and insisted he hadn't eaten anything with nuts. But before I could even process her denial, Rachel suddenly broke down in tears. Between sobs, she blurted out, "Mommy gave him my peanut butter sandwich even when I told her he couldn't eat it." I saw red. Without thinking, I lunged at Joanna and slapped her across the face, right there in the middle of the hospital. She tried to retaliate, but the nurses immediately stepped in, holding her back while the doctor rushed to check on Egon. Joanna then tried to grab Rachel, but the poor girl was clinging to my leg, sobbing like her life depended on it. My heart ached for her. I knew if she went home with Joanna now, she'd be in for a nightmare. Without hesitation, I grabbed my phone and called Noel. I told him Rachel was safe, but he needed to come to the hospital immediately. I wanted the right parent to be here for her. Joanna kept trying to cause a scene, but the nurses warned her that if she didn't calm down, she'd be escorted out. That shut her up real quick. When Noel arrived, Rachel ran straight into his arms, clinging to him for dear life. He took one look at the situation, Joanna fuming, me shaken, Rachel sobbing, and knew something serious had gone down. By then, we had been at the hospital for a couple of hours, and thankfully, Egon was stable. The doctors said they had managed to control his reaction but emphasized that it was everyone's responsibility to be extra careful with his food. They decided to keep him overnight for observation, and he would be discharged the next day. Noel offered to drive me home, but I shook my head. "We need to talk about what happened," I said firmly. "And I need Joanna and Rachel there, too. That means you have to be there as well." This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. We went to a diner to grab a bite, but nothing could have prepared me for what Joanna said next. I had managed to keep my composure for the past few hours, but the moment I heard her, my blood started boiling all over again. I turned to Rachel first. "Can you tell me what happened, sweetheart?" I asked gently, but before she could even open her mouth, Joanna shot her a sharp glare. Rachel immediately looked down, clearly terrified of saying the wrong thing. Noel, seeing her hesitation, stepped in. "It's okay, baby," he reassured her. "You need to tell us the truth. No one is going to hurt you. I promise, I'll protect you." Rachel hesitated, still nervous. Meanwhile, Joanna was already stirring up trouble, raising her voice and accusing us of bullying her daughter. "I won't stand for this. You're trying to turn my own child against me, she screeched. I had had enough. Shut up and let her talk, I snapped. Your intimidation tactics don't work anymore. It took some coaxing, but Rachel finally spoke. She explained that Joanna had given them money to buy sandwiches from a stall. Rachel got a peanut butter sandwich, and Egon chose a mixed fruit jam sandwich. On the way back, Egon casually asked Rachel if he could have a bite of hers. She immediately told him no, reminding him that he wasn't allowed to eat peanut butter. That part surprised me. Egon knows about his nut allergy. Why would he even ask? But I was relieved that Rachel had the sense to refuse. She said he didn't push the issue, but he looked a little sad that he couldn't try it. Then they got back to where Joanna was. And this is where things took a dark turn. First of all, why the hell wasn't Joanna with them? Two little kids, wandering around unsupervised? But that wasn't even the worst part. Joanna immediately noticed Egon looking mopey and asked Rachel why. When Rachel explained that he wanted a bite of her sandwich but couldn't have one, Joanna got angry. She started lecturing Rachel about sharing, saying she had been raised better and calling her selfish. Rachel tried to stand her ground. She reminded Joanna that Egon could not eat peanut butter, but Joanna wasn't having it. The conversation escalated into an argument. Rachel, bless her heart, tried to stop her mom, but Joanna, her own mother, called her a greedy little brat and ripped the sandwich right out of her hands. By then, both Rachel and Egon were crying. Rachel pleaded with Joanna, saying, "But Mommy, Andy said he'll get sick if he eats that." And do you know what Joanna said? "It's just a harmless prank. Nothing will happen to him." Then, before either of them could stop her, Joanna shoved the peanut butter sandwich into Egon's hands. At this point, Egon was crying too. Through his tears, he begged, "I don't want it. I just want to go home." But Joanna didn't care. She force-fed him the sandwich. Rachel didn't use those exact words, but the way she described it made my stomach turn. I knew what Joanna had done. She wanted to prove a point, at the expense of my child's life. And that was something I would never forgive. It took every ounce of my strength not to lunge at Joanna right then and there. The sheer rage coursing through me was overwhelming, but I held back, for Rachel's sake. The poor girl had been through enough for one day. When she finished speaking, fresh tears welled up in her eyes. She clung to Noel, sobbing into his shirt, and whispered something that made my heart ache. "Daddy, I want to go with you. Mommy scares me." Joanna scoffed, rolling her eyes like Rachel was spewing nonsense. She wasn't even trying to hide her disdain. I took a deep breath and turned to her. "Do you have anything to say for yourself?" She crossed her arms. "I don't need to defend myself to the likes of you," she sneered. "If you'd rather believe a 5-year-old over a grown woman, then maybe you should get your head checked. Clearly, there isn't a single logical brain cell left in you." I was too exhausted to argue. I had spent every last bit of my energy keeping my son alive today. I didn't have anything left to waste on her. "Fine," I said coldly. "If you refuse to explain yourself, I'll take Rachel's word as the truth and act accordingly." She smirked. "And what exactly do you think you can do?" I let out a quiet laugh, shaking my head. "Oh, Joanna, you have no idea." I met her gaze, letting the weight of my words sink in. "I might be kind, but Jay? Not so much when it comes to his son. When I tell him what you did, I hope for your sake you're ready for whatever comes next." And just like that, the smirk vanished. Panic flickered across her face. "Wait, don't tell Jay," she blurted out, suddenly backtracking. "Rachel is lying. She's just a kid. You can't believe her." She started rambling, scrambling for an excuse, but I cut her off. "You had your chance to explain, Joanna. You blew it." I turned on my heel and walked out, leaving her to deal with Noel. Rachel was his responsibility now. I hated leaving her behind. She had saved Egon's life, and I wanted to scoop her up and take her somewhere safe. But she had a father, and it was his job to step in now. On the way home, I called Jay, and I told him everything. By the time I finished, I could hear the tension in his voice. "I'm coming back." "Jay, you don't have to." "No, I'm coming back." I didn't argue. Truth be told, I needed him here. I'd spent the whole day being strong, keeping it together for Egon. But the second I heard the anger in Jay's voice, I felt myself start to unravel. Egon was okay. That was what mattered. But I wasn't letting Joanna get away with this. She had deliberately endangered my child. She needed to pay. And one way or another, she would. I just didn't know how yet. But I did know one thing for sure. She would never get the chance to be alone with Egon again. And at this point, I wasn't just worried about my son. I was terrified for Rachel, because if she was this scared of her own mother in public, I didn't even want to imagine what happened behind closed doors. Update 1. Sorry for the delay. Things have been overwhelming at home, and honestly, checking Reddit didn't even cross my mind. But I know many of you were waiting for an update. Jay came back the next day, and I hugged him so tight I probably displaced some of his organs. Egon was discharged from the hospital, exhausted but otherwise okay. We let him sleep as long as he needed, just grateful to have him home. Once things settled, I asked Jay if he had spoken to Joanna. He didn't even hesitate. There's nothing to talk about, he said. I will never forgive her for this. Had it been a mistake, maybe, there would have been room for some form of forgiveness. But this wasn't a mistake. This was intentional. And Jay couldn't just move on from that. I asked him what we should do. My initial thought was to tell the entire family. Make sure everyone knew exactly what she had done, so there would be no questioning our decision to go no contact. But when I suggested this, Jay looked at me like I had lost my mind. We need to do more than just tell people, he said. You need to stop thinking of her as family, because she sure as hell didn't think of Egon that way. And he was right. Joanna had willingly put our son's life in danger. Not out of ignorance, not out of a lapse in judgment, but intentionally. A grown woman, fully aware of Egon's severe allergy, ignored not only my warnings, but even her own 5-year-old daughter's desperate pleas. She forced a child to consume something that could have killed him. Jay's voice was cold. This wasn't an accident. It was spite, malice, and God knows what else she's capable of. I had known it, deep down, but hearing it said out loud made it real. I didn't want to accept how far things had spiraled, but there was no denying it anymore. Joanna was dangerous, and the only thing we could do now was ensure she never had the chance to hurt anyone else again, especially Rachel. Jay asked where she was, and I told him Noelle had likely taken her for the night. It was the weekend, meaning Rachel had already spent 3 full days with her dad. Maybe, by the time she went back, Joanna would have calmed down. Maybe Rachel wouldn't have to bear the brunt of her mother's wrath. But then Jay called Noelle. Rachel was still shaken. She didn't want to go back. She was terrified of her own mother. And that was all Jay needed to hear. This is the best time to call CPS, he told me. No child should ever be this afraid of a parent. And he was right. Again. Final update. For a brief moment, doubt crept in. What if Rachel was scared because she hadn't told the truth? She was just 5. Maybe there had been an unintentional mix-up, and she feared getting in trouble. Maybe she had blamed Joanna out of panic, and Joanna had played along to keep the kids' playtime from being permanently ruined over an innocent, albeit fatal, mistake. But deep down, I knew better. No child could fabricate such a detailed story. Still, I struggled to believe that Joanna, fully aware of Egon's allergy, had deliberately fed him the sandwich after being told no. It was beyond reckless. It was insane. And she had never acted this way before. So we called Noelle again. I asked if Joanna had admitted to anything. He told us she had broken down and confessed every last detail. Noelle had secretly recorded the conversation. He warned us that the audio was a mess, too dark to listen to properly, but we had him forward it anyway. And there it was, clear as day, Joanna admitting to everything. I don't know why I did it, but I did. Noelle was livid. He demanded to know why she hadn't taken Egon to the emergency room herself. Her answer? She couldn't afford the bill. He told her she should be grateful that Rachel had the sense to call me, because if she hadn't, Egon would be dead. The recording captured her sobbing, repeating, I'm sorry, over and over. But I felt nothing for her. Not an ounce of sympathy. Not anymore. That's when it truly hit me, how close we had come to losing Egon. The stress of the past few days had dulled the full weight of what had happened, but in that moment, I realized, if Rachel hadn't been brave enough to call me, my son would be gone. I owe that child my son's life, and I will do everything in my power to protect her from that monster. We called CPS immediately. We told them everything. That Joanna had deliberately triggered a severe allergic reaction in a child and then failed to respond appropriately because she didn't want to pay for medical care. If she was capable of that, how safe was her own daughter with her? The officer took down all the details and asked about the custody agreement. We explained everything. Then, 2 days later, on Monday morning, CPS showed up at Joanna's door. And we knew exactly when it happened, because she sent us a vile text. I know this was you. I should have killed Egon when I had the chance. I blocked her immediately. Jay didn't. He called her and unleashed hell. He told her in no uncertain terms that she was a sick, unstable excuse for a mother, and that he would go to the ends of the earth to keep Rachel safe from her. Then we roped in my in-laws. At first, they made excuses for Joanna. But when we played them the recording, their defense crumbled. They had nothing to say. I don't know what kind of relationship they'll continue to have with her, and frankly, I don't care. As far as Jay and I are concerned, she is dead to us. Now, we're just waiting to see what CPS does. Unfortunately, since there's no clear case of neglect or physical abuse, we don't know if they'll take Rachel away. But we do know that as long as she stays with Joanna, her life will be hell. And we won't stop fighting until she's safe. Final update, justice served. CPS has officially removed Rachel from Joanna's care. She's now going to live with Noel permanently. Changing the custody agreement set Joanna off, and now we know why. It wasn't because she loved Rachel or would miss her. No, it was because she was living off the child support payments. That money, an insane amount, is gone now. And she lost it when she realized she'd actually have to fend for herself. Noel, for his part, is fine. Keeping Rachel with him will be easier financially, though money was never a factor for him. What matters is Rachel's well-being. CPS has also advised him to take her to therapy because ever since the incident with Egon, she's been having nightmares. That poor kid. She doesn't deserve any of this. Meanwhile, Egon is doing great. He doesn't even remember much. When we ask him about his day with Annie, Joanna, and Rachel, he just smiles and says he had so much fun, and that the best part was the hospital ride at the end. I still can't wrap my head around it. How could someone resent a child so much? As expected, my mother-in-law is upset, not over what happened to Egon, but over Joanna losing custody. She keeps acting like we took Rachel away from her, when in reality, Joanna did that to herself. I don't understand how she can still sympathize with her after everything. My father-in-law, on the other hand, is furious. At first, he refused to believe that Joanna could be this unhinged, but now that the truth is undeniable, he's apologized to us for doubting what happened. It still annoys me that he needed proof, but I get it. No father wants to admit that one of their children is capable of trying to kill their own nephew. It's horrifying. Rachel and Egon still see each other regularly. We never wanted Rachel to feel like she did something wrong that day, or that she could have done more. But she still blames herself. It kills me to see her carry that weight. She even made us sorry cards, one for Egon, one for Jay, and one for me. It's one of my most prized possessions. I try to spend as much time with her as I can. Say what you will, but I believe a child needs a maternal figure in their life. And Rachel has never had that. Joanna may have given birth to her, but that doesn't make her a mother. She proved that with Egon. A real mother, a real parent, has instincts to protect children, to care for them, to put them first. Joanna doesn't have that. And if anyone wants to argue with me about it, go ahead. I said what I said. Now, we're just trying to make life feel normal again for the kids. Even though, at this point, nothing feels normal anymore. Update 3. Joanna crosses the line. Apparently, Joanna has been desperate to get in touch with Jay and me. My mother-in-law mentioned that she's been trying to reach out, but since we've blocked her everywhere, she's just screaming into the void at this point. That's her problem, not ours. What is a problem, though, is my ML trying to play mediator. She keeps hinting that we should talk to Joanna and make things right as a family, but every time she brings it up, we shut it down. Both Jay and I are this close to going no contact with her too. Either she gets that we're done with Joanna, or she loses access to us as well. But now, things have escalated again. Joanna tried to take Rachel from school. Luckily, the school was already aware of the situation, so they acted immediately and contacted Noel. Rachel is safe, and, unsurprisingly, she wants nothing to do with her mother. Noel is now considering filing for a restraining order, but he's torn because at the end of the day, Joanna is Rachel's mother. And no matter how much she's messed up, nothing can change that. Personally, I'd rather stay out of the drama. But I also know that this entire mess started because I called CPS. And while I don't regret it, because Rachel needed to be taken away from that woman, things are getting dangerous now. This isn't just about bad parenting anymore. This is criminal. Joanna is spiraling, and I have no idea what she's going to try next. For now, they're looking at options, but if things don't settle, the restraining order is the only way forward. I hope it doesn't come to that. But if it does, Joanna has no one to blame but herself.